Emperor Krelnox stretched his forearms in what we Zephyrians call the gesture of absolute boredom. Honestly, conquering planets had become so tediously predictable that he could practically do it in his sleep. And trust me, after subjugating 47 worlds in the last cycle, the novelty had worn off faster than cheap atmospheric suits. "My glorious Emperor," announced Commander Vaxdil, his voice dripping with that particular brand of enthusiasm that comes from never having actually fought anything more dangerous than a cafeteria food processor, the target world designated. He squinted at his datapad like it contained the secrets of the universe. "Earth lies before us in all its pathetic vulnerability." Krelnox suppressed what humans might call an eye roll, though with 6 eyes, the effect was considerably more dramatic. "Ah yes, the famous blue marble. Tell me, Commander, what makes this particular rock so special that it requires my personal attention?" The War Council chamber fell into that peculiar silence that occurs when everyone present suddenly realizes they might have to justify their existence. General Zorthik cleared his throat with a sound like grinding metal. "Well, Your Magnificence, the inhabitants call themselves humans." "Humans," repeated Krelnox, as if tasting something unpleasant. "And what exactly do these humans do besides occupy our valuable real estate?" They fight each other mostly," offered Captain Nexlow from the back row, clearly hoping to avoid direct eye contact. "Constantly, actually. Over resources, territory, something called religion, and apparently the proper way to prepare caffeinated beverages." "Charming," muttered the Emperor. "Continue." Commander Vaxintail activated the holographic display with the kind of theatrical flourish that suggested he had been practicing in front of a mirror. The image of Earth materialized above the conference table, spinning lazily like a cosmic disco ball. "Behold the primitive world of the humans. Population approximately 8 billion, spread across 7 continents. Their most advanced technology appears to be something called the Internet, which they primarily use to share pictures of small domesticated mammals and argue about politics." 8 billion? Krelnox leaned forward with mild interest. "That is, a considerable number of potential slaves." "Indeed, Your Eminence, though I should mention, they are rather fragile creatures. Bipedal, completely hairless except for arbitrary patches on their heads and faces, and they require constant hydration or they simply cease functioning. Most peculiar design, really." Admiral Kexisvara, who had remained silent until now, finally spoke up. "My Emperor, our intelligence suggests these humans have only recently achieved what they laughingly call spaceflight. Their fastest vessels require years to travel between planets in their own system. Years. We could traverse their entire galaxy in the time it takes them to reach their own moon." "How delightfully primitive," chuckled Krelnox. "And their military capabilities?" "Laughable," declared Commander Vaxistil with the confidence of someone who had clearly never met a human holding a weapon. "They still use chemical propulsion for their projectile weapons." "Chemical? Can you imagine? Their most advanced fighters require biological pilots who can only withstand a fraction of the G-forces our automated systems handle routinely. They even have something called fatigue, which apparently requires them to cease functioning for several hours each day." General Zorthak consulted his tactical display. "Their largest military vessels are less than 300 meters in length. Our flagship alone is 12 kilometers. It would be like a swimming pool creature challenging a star destroyer." "Swimming pool creature," repeated Krelnox thoughtfully.
"I like that. Continue."
"Furthermore," added Captain Nexlow, warming to the subject, "their weapons technology appears frozen in some kind of primitive state. They still use explosive projectiles and directed energy weapons that would barely scratch our hull plating. Their most powerful devices require splitting atoms, which is something we mastered approximately 3,000 years ago." Krelnox drummed his fingers on the armrest of his command throne, producing a sound like rainfall on metal. "So to summarize, we have 8 billion technologically primitive bipeds who fight among themselves, require regular maintenance breaks, and possess weapons that would be considered antiques in any civilized museum." "Precisely, Your Magnificence. And they have something we want because—"
See.
An uncomfortable pause filled the chamber. Commander Vaxil coughed politely. "Well, the planet does occupy a rather strategic position along the trade routes to the Outer Rim territories, and the mineral wealth is supposedly quite substantial. Plus there is the matter of imperial prestige." "Ah yes, prestige. Krelnox nodded sagely. Cannot have the other galactic empires thinking we have gone soft. Very well, Commander. What do you propose? Vaxil straightened his posture with visible pride. My Emperor, I suggest we demonstrate the legendary mercy of the Zephyrian Empire, instead of simply obliterating their civilization from orbit, which would be the efficient approach. We should offer them the opportunity to surrender peacefully. How remarkably generous of us, said Krelnox dryly. And how long shall we give these humans to contemplate their inevitable defeat? I was thinking 48 hours. Your Magnificence. More than sufficient time for even their primitive communication systems to spread the word across their planet. After all, it only takes our fastest couriers 37 minutes to deliver messages across similar distances. Admiral Kexisvara nodded approvingly. 48 hours should be more than adequate for them to organize whatever pathetic surrender ceremony their customs require. Plenty of time for them to gather their leaders, compose their inevitable speeches about fighting to the last breath, realize the hopelessness of their situation, and then capitulate with whatever dignity they can muster. Perfect, declared Emperor Krelnox, rising from his throne with the kind of casual authority that comes from never having been seriously challenged. Commander Vaxit, prepare the standard surrender ultimatum. Make sure to include all the usual threats about orbital bombardment and atmospheric incineration. You know how primitives love their dramatic language. At once, Your Magnificence. Should I mention our willingness to accept unconditional surrender? Obviously, we are not barbarians after all. Oh, and Vaxtil. Yes, my Emperor? Make sure to emphasize that this is a limited time offer. Nothing motivates swift decision-making quite like an approaching deadline. As the War Council dispersed to carry out their Emperor's commands, none of them noticed the small detail that would soon prove rather significant. In their exhaustive intelligence reports about human military capabilities, no one had thought to ask what humans typically did when someone gave them an ultimatum. That oversight was about to become extremely expensive. Admiral Quindar settled into his monitoring station with the satisfied air of someone about to watch a particularly entertaining disaster unfold. The transmission array hummed with power as it prepared to deliver the Zephyrian ultimatum across every communication frequency the primitive humans possessed. This was always his favorite part of any conquest, the moment when inferior species finally grasped the true scope of their predicament. Communications Officer Plexus Wynn, he called out. Adjusting his ceremonial viewing lens for optimal dramatic effect, initiate broadcast on all human frequencies, military, civilian, emergency services, even their entertainment channels. I want every human on that pathetic little world to hear this message simultaneously. Broadcast commencing in 3, 2, 1, transmission active. Admiral, the message that began flooding Earth's airwaves was a masterpiece of imperial intimidation, carefully crafted by the Empire's finest diplomatic linguists. It opened with the traditional Zephyrian war chant, translated into what their computers assured them was proper human English, followed by a detailed explanation of humanity's hopeless situation and the generous terms being offered. People of Earth, the message began in Krelnox's most imperious tone. You are hereby informed that your world has been selected for incorporation into the glorious Zephyrian Empire. Resistance is not merely futile, it is mathematically impossible. You have 48 of your planetary rotations to surrender unconditionally. Failure to comply will result in complete planetary sterilization. This message will repeat every 30 minutes until compliance is achieved. Glory to the Empire. Admiral Quindar leaned back in his command chair, already anticipating the delicious panic that would surely follow. In his considerable experience, primitives typically responded to such announcements with one of three reactions: immediate surrender, hysterical panic, or desperate but ultimately doomed preparations for resistance. All three were equally entertaining, though he personally preferred the hysterical panic option for its sheer comedic value. Begin monitoring all human communication channels, he ordered his staff. I want real-time analysis of their response patterns. How long until their governments start calling emergency sessions? Place your bets, gentlemen. I give them 6 hours before the first surrender delegation attempts to establish contact. Lieutenant Zechner, fresh from the academy and eager to impress his superiors, activated the listening array with obvious excitement. All channels active, Admiral. We should start seeing responses within minutes. The first intercepted human communications began filtering through the translation systems almost immediately. and Admiral Quindar prepared himself for the usual mix of terror and desperation. What he heard instead made him question whether the translation software was functioning properly. "Hey Bob, you getting this weird signal on the emergency frequency?" "Yeah, Jim. Some kind of prank call or something. Sounds like one of those alien invasion movies. Pretty good special effects on the voice though. Think we should report it?" "Nah, probably just some kids playing with a radio transmitter. Remember that time Tommy Henderson convinced half the county that Martians had landed behind the Walmart?" Admiral Quindar blinked several times, which in Zephyrian physiology involves considerably more eye coordination than humans might expect. "Lieutenant, are you certain the translation matrix is functioning correctly?" "Absolutely, Admiral. All systems nominal. Shall I continue monitoring?" "Yes, but focus on their military channels. Perhaps their civilian population is too primitive to understand the gravity of the situation." The military communications proved even more baffling. "Control, this is Radar Station Delta 7. We're getting some kind of interference on the emergency broadcast system." "Copy that, Delta 7. What kind of interference?" "Well, sir, it appears to be, it claims to be an alien ultimatum demanding planetary surrender." A pause. "Then Delta 7, did you just say alien ultimatum?" "That's affirmative, Control. Complete with dramatic music and everything. Sounds like someone's been watching too much science fiction. Run a diagnostic on your equipment. Delta 7, then take a coffee break. A long one." "Will do, Control. Delta 7 out." Lieutenant Zechner looked up from his console with visible confusion. "Admiral, I am detecting no elevated stress indicators in their communications. No emergency protocols have been activated. Their military appears to be treating our ultimatum as some form of technical malfunction." "That cannot be correct," Admiral Quindar stated firmly, though a tiny seed of doubt was beginning to sprout in what passed for his mind. "Perhaps their leadership has not yet received the message. Check their governmental communications." The governmental channels proved to be the most bewildering of all. "Mr. President, we're getting reports of some kind of hoax broadcast claiming to be from aliens." "Aliens? What do they want?" "Apparently, sir, they want us to surrender the planet within 48 hours, or they'll destroy us all." "And how are we responding to this obvious prank?" "The FCC is investigating, sir. They think it might be coming from that ham radio operator in Nevada who's been causing problems. You know, the one with the conspiracy theories about lizard people. Handle it quietly. Last thing we need is mass panic over some basement dweller with delusions of grandeur." Admiral Quindar felt what humans might recognize as the first stirrings of genuine confusion. In over 2 decades of military service, he had never encountered a species that responded to an invasion ultimatum by ignoring it. "Lieutenant, expand the monitoring range. Check their news services, their internet, anything that might indicate they understand the seriousness of their situation." What they found there was even more mystifying. "Breaking news tonight. Mysterious radio signal claims to be from hostile aliens demanding Earth surrender. Local authorities believe it's an elaborate hoax. In related news, the weather tomorrow will be partly cloudy with a chance of rain. Posted on social media. LOL. Did anyone else hear that fake alien thing on the radio? My dad totally fell for it and started building a bunker in the backyard again." Government spokesperson states, "We are aware of the unusual broadcast and are investigating its source. The public is advised to remain calm and go about their normal activities." Commander Vaxistel chose that moment to stride onto the bridge with his usual theatrical flair. "Admiral,
How goes the monitoring of our soon-to-be subjects?"
I trust they are sufficiently terrified." Admiral Quindar turned to face his superior with an expression that suggested he might be experiencing what humans call a migraine. "Commander, I believe we may have encountered an unexpected complication." "Complication? What sort of complication?" "Well, sir, the humans appear to think our ultimatum is fake."
Fake?
Commander Vaxtel's voice rose an octave. "How can they think it is fake? We broadcast it on every frequency they possess." "Yes, sir. But they seem to believe it is what they call a prank, or possibly a technical malfunction. Some are comparing it to their entertainment media." Entertainment media. Apparently humans create fictional stories about alien invasions for amusement purposes. They think our ultimatum is one of these fictional stories. Commander Vaxtel stared at the Admiral for several long moments. Are you telling me that these primitives receive a genuine threat from a superior galactic civilization, and their first response is to assume it is not real? That appears to be the case, sir. But that makes no sense whatsoever. How can they not recognize genuine Imperial authority when they hear it? Admiral Quindar consulted his monitors again. Sir, I am now detecting what appears to be laughter. They are laughing at our ultimatum. Laughing. Yes, sir. Apparently, several humans have shared recordings of our message on their social networks with humorous commentary.
Odds.
One particularly popular response translates roughly to, "My 5-year-old nephew could do better voice acting than this." Commander Vaxtil stood in stunned silence for nearly a full minute before speaking again. Admiral, how many species have we conquered using this exact same ultimatum format? 47, sir. All of them surrendered within 12 hours. And this is the first time anyone has laughed? Yes, sir. Definitely the first time. As they watched, more human communications continued flooding their sensors. Instead of panic or surrender preparations, they were intercepting conversations about weekend plans, complaints about traffic, and debates over something called pineapple pizza. It was as if 8 billion humans had collectively decided that an ultimatum from a vastly superior galactic empire was simply not worth interrupting their daily routines. Admiral Quindar had the distinct feeling that this conquest was going to be more complicated than anyone had anticipated. Captain Morthake checked his chronometer with the kind of theatrical precision that suggested he had been practicing the gesture in front of a mirror. 24 hours had elapsed since the ultimatum, and still no surrender from the hairless bipeds below. Not that this surprised him in the slightest. In his vast experience of exactly 0 actual combat situations, primitives always waited until the last possible moment to capitulate. It was probably some kind of face-saving ritual. "Weapons Officer Drakdel," he announced to his bridge crew with the confidence of someone who had never met genuine opposition, "begin charging the primary bombardment arrays. I want those surface-to-orbit cannons ready to demonstrate proper Zephyrian superiority the moment these humans realize their hopeless situation." "Charging now, Captain," replied Drektail with enthusiasm that would have been more appropriate for announcing free cake in the mess hall. "Estimated time to full charge 6 hours, more than sufficient to reduce their largest cities to glowing craters." Captain Morthek nodded approvingly as he surveyed his battle fleet through the main viewport. 12 heavy cruisers, 47 destroyers, and his own magnificent flagship arranged in perfect attack formation above the blue marble that would soon bear the Zephyrian flag. It was, he reflected with considerable satisfaction, rather like positioning a sledgehammer above an egg. "Navigation Officer Krellmax, adjust our orbital pattern to optimize firing solutions on their major population centers. I want clean targeting data on what they call New York, London, Beijing, and that entertainment district in California." "Orbital positioning complete, Captain. Though I should mention, our sensors are detecting some unusual activity from their surface installations." "Unusual how?" asked Morthek, though his tone suggested that nothing these primitives could do would qualify as genuinely concerning. "Well, sir, it appears their military forces are moving." Captain Morthek suppressed what humans might recognize as a snort of amusement. "Of course they are moving, Officer Krellmax. It is probably their standard pre-surrender positioning. They need to gather their leaders in one location to formally hand over control of their planet. Most civilized species prefer to surrender with some semblance of ceremony." "Yes, sir, but these movements seem rather extensive. Multiple naval vessels departing port simultaneously, atmospheric craft scrambling from bases across all continents, and something that looks like mass mobilization of their ground forces." "Ah," said Morthek knowingly. "The classic primitive response. They are making a show of strength before accepting the inevitable, rather like a small animal puffing itself up to appear larger when confronted by a predator. Quite touching, really." Tactical Officer Vornak consulted his display with the thoroughness of someone who had graduated third in his class at the Imperial War College. "Captain, I am detecting approximately 2,000 human military vessels leaving their home ports. Additionally, their atmospheric defense grid appears to be activating." 2,000? Morthek chuckled with the kind of condescending amusement typically reserved for watching children play war games. How delightfully optimistic of them. Do they seriously believe that 2,000 primitive vessels could pose any threat to the might of the Zephyrian Armada? Apparently so, sir. Their largest vessels appear to be approximately 300 meters in length, as our intelligence predicted. 300 meters. Morthek slapped his thigh in genuine amusement. Our smallest escort frigate is longer than their largest battleship. This will be less a battle than a very one-sided demonstration of proper military technology. Commander Vaxtel's voice crackled through the communication system from the command vessel. All ships, this is Fleet Command. The primitives appear to be staging some sort of military parade before their inevitable surrender. Continue preparations but do not engage unless they are foolish enough to fire first. We are civilized beings after all. Understood, Fleet Command, Morthek responded. Shall we assume battle stations for the sake of proper protocol? By all means, Captain. Let us give these humans a proper demonstration of Zephyrian military precision. It will make excellent footage for the victory documentaries. As the fleet moved into final attack positions, the bridge crew settled into their roles with the relaxed efficiency of professionals preparing for a routine training exercise. After all, what possible threat could primitive chemical rockets pose to ships equipped with quantum shielding and graviton cannons? Sir, announced Sensor Officer Plexinel, I am detecting additional human naval movements. It appears more vessels are emerging from their submarine bases. Submarines. Morthek raised what passed for an eyebrow among his species. They still use underwater vessels? How charmingly antiquated. I suppose when your technology is limited to chemical propulsion, you must make do with whatever environments you can access. These submarines appear to be quite large, Captain. Some of them are nearly 200 meters in length. Still pathetically small by any reasonable standard, Morthek declared, though I admit there seem to be rather more of them than our intelligence suggested. How many are we detecting now? Approximately 800, sir, and the number keeps rising. For the first time, Captain Morthek experienced what humans might call a moment of pause, not concern, certainly, more like mild curiosity about why primitives would deploy so many obviously inadequate vessels. 800 submarines, 2,000 surface vessels, and how many atmospheric craft did you say? Current count shows approximately 15,000 atmospheric fighters and bombers, Captain, though many of them appear to be older models. 15,000? Morthek blinked several times. That seems excessive for a surrender ceremony. Perhaps they intend to stage a massive flyby demonstration before formally capitulating, suggested Weapons Officer Drektail helpfully. Some species enjoy elaborate pageantry. Yes, that must be it, agreed Morthek, though he was beginning to experience what his academy instructors would have called tactical confusion. Still, it does seem rather wasteful to mobilize their entire military just to surrender it. Captain, interrupted Communications Officer Rexstar, I am intercepting human military communications. They appear to be discussing something called Operation Thunder Response. Operation Thunder Response. Morthek considered this, probably their code name for the surrender ceremony. Primitives do love their dramatic titles. Sir, they keep mentioning defensive positions and something about target acquisition. Target acquisition for their surrender presentation, obviously. They will want to ensure their leaders are properly positioned for the ceremony. Admiral Quindar's voice suddenly filled the bridge from the flagship. All vessels be advised that human military activity is exceeding projected parameters. However, intelligence confirms that their weapons technology remains hopelessly primitive. Maintain current positions and prepare for what will undoubtedly be the most lopsided victory in Imperial history. Captain Morthek nodded confidently. You heard the Admiral. Continue preparations. In 18 hours we will witness the surrender of an entire species. Gentlemen, we are about to become part of history. What none of them realized was that they were absolutely correct about becoming part of history. They were just wrong about which part. As the Zephyrian fleet settled into its final attack positions, completely confident in their overwhelming superiority, the countdown continued. 18 hours, until the ultimatum expired. 18 hours until 8 billion humans would have to choose between surrender and annihilation. The aliens were so focused on their own glorious anticipation that they failed to notice one small detail in all their intercepted human communications. No one had used the word surrender even once. Not even once. Admiral Quindar drummed his talons against his command console with increasing agitation as the chronometer displayed the sobering truth. 6 hours until the ultimatum expired. And still no word of surrender from the stubborn humans below. What had begun as an amusing display of primitive defiance was starting to feel more like, well, actual defiance. Communications Officer Plex's win, he called out with slightly less confidence than he had possessed 42 hours earlier. What is the current status of human military communications? Surely by now their leadership has begun discussing surrender terms. Plex's win consulted his monitoring array with the expression of someone trying to solve a particularly confusing puzzle. Admiral, their communications have actually increased in frequency and intensity. However, I am still detecting no discussions of capitulation. Instead, they appear to be coordinating something they call a defensive perimeter. Defensive perimeter? Admiral Quinder felt his confidence wobble like a three-legged table. Alls. So exactly. Do they seriously believe their primitive vessels can defend against the Zephyrian Armada? It would appear so, sir. Their fleet movements have become significantly more organized in the last 6 hours. What initially looked like random positioning now appears to be, well, tactical deployment. Captain Morthick's voice crackled through the fleet communication system, though his earlier enthusiasm had been replaced by something approaching bewilderment. Admiral, I am detecting human vessels in positions that our tactical computers are identifying as classical defensive formations. How do primitives who barely achieved spaceflight know about classical defensive formations? Coincidence, Admiral Quindar declared, though the word sounded hollow even to him. Or perhaps they learned them from their entertainment media. These humans seem obsessed with fictional warfare. Sir, interrupted Lieutenant Zeknar, his voice carrying an unmistakable note of confusion. I am intercepting a priority communication from the human military command structure. The signal strength suggests it is being broadcast on multiple frequencies simultaneously. Excellent. Finally, their surrender message. Put it through the main speakers so the entire bridge can enjoy this moment of inevitable capitulation. What filled the Zephyrian bridge was not the expected message of defeat, but a voice that somehow managed to sound both completely calm and absolutely terrifying at the same time. The speaker possessed the kind of measured tone that suggested he had spent considerable time thinking about violence and found it neither disturbing nor particularly exciting, merely a tool to be applied when appropriate. Attention. Unidentified vessels currently occupying Earth orbit. This is General Harrison Pike, Supreme Allied Commander of Earth Defense Forces. You have 60 seconds to respond to this communication. Admiral Quindar blinked all 6 eyes in rapid succession. Did he just give us a deadline? I believe so, sir, replied Communications Officer Plexawin with obvious confusion. Should we respond? Respond? To a primitive? Admiral Quindar's voice rose several octaves. The audacity of these creatures is simply astounding. Continue monitoring. I want to hear what passes for military posturing among the hairless apes. General Pike's voice continued with the same unnaturally calm delivery. 45 seconds. I will assume you are reviewing my message and considering your options. Let me clarify those options for you. Oh, this should be entertaining, muttered Captain Morthick through the communication link. I wonder what threats a primitive species could possibly imagine would concern a galactic empire. Your intelligence regarding human military capabilities appears to be somewhat outdated, General Pike continued conversationally. 30 seconds. I recommend you use this time wisely. Commander Vaxtel joined the communication channel with a voice full of barely suppressed laughter. Admiral, are we actually listening to a human attempt to threaten the Imperial fleet? This is remarkable. We must record this for the entertainment archives. 15 seconds, announced General Pike, with the same calm tone one might use to comment on the weather. I want to be absolutely clear about what happens next, so there can be no confusion about the sequence of events. The sequence of events. Admiral Quindar found himself leaning forward despite his better judgment. What sequence of events could possibly concern us? 10 seconds, continued the human general. 9, 8, 7, 6, 5. Sir, Lieutenant Zeknar's voice carried a note of genuine concern. Our sensors are detecting some kind of energy buildup from the human vessels. 4, 3, 2. Energy buildup? Admiral Quindar felt the first cold touch of something that might have been actual worry. What kind of energy buildup? 1. General Pike's voice shifted from calm to something that made every Zephyrian on the bridge feel like prey animals suddenly realizing they were being watched by predators. Unknown hostile vessels, you have 10 seconds to power down your weapon systems and prepare for surrender, or you will be destroyed. This is not a negotiation. This is not a threat. This is a statement of fact. 10 seconds. Choose wisely. The Zephyrian bridge fell into absolute silence. Admiral Quindar found his mouth opening and closing without producing sounds, like a fish attempting to breathe air. Commander Vaxadil's voice broke through the stunned quiet. Did that human just give us an ultimatum? 9 seconds. Sir. Lieutenant Zeknar's voice climbed to a near shriek. Energy readings from human vessels are spiking beyond our sensor parameters. Whatever they are charging up, it is significantly more powerful than anything in our intelligence reports. 8 seconds. Admiral Quindar managed to find his voice. This is impossible. How can primitives possess energy weapons more advanced than ours? Our intelligence indicated they still use chemical explosives. 7 seconds. Admiral. Captain Morthick's voice carried the first note of genuine alarm anyone had heard from him. My tactical officer is reporting that human vessels have achieved weapons lock on our entire fleet. How is that possible? Their targeting systems should not be capable of tracking ships equipped with quantum stealth generators. 6 seconds. Maybe, suggested Communications Officer Plexus Wynn in a voice small enough to hide under a pebble. Maybe we should ask them to clarify their terms. 5 seconds. Clarify their terms? Admiral Quindar's voice broke entirely. We are the Zephyrian Empire. We do not ask primitives to clarify anything. We are the ones who give ultimatums. 4 seconds. Sir, Lieutenant Zek_Nar announced with the tone of someone delivering very bad news. I am detecting massive power signatures from previously undetected human installations across their planet's surface. It appears they have been concealing the true extent of their defensive capabilities. 3 seconds. Commander Vaxab's voice cut through the growing panic. Admiral, perhaps we should consider the possibility that our intelligence regarding human capabilities was incomplete. 2 seconds. Admiral Quindar stared at his tactical display, watching as thousands of previously invisible human weapons systems suddenly appeared on his sensors like malevolent stars being born. How is this possible? 1 second. Admiral, Captain Morthick's voice cracked with panic. Whatever we are going to do, we need to do it right now. General Pike's voice returned, still carrying that same terrifying calm.
0.
You have chosen to maintain hostile posture, engaging all targets. May God have mercy on your souls, because we will not. And in that moment, as warning alarms began screaming throughout the Zephyrian fleet, Admiral Quindar realized that their intelligence had been wrong about absolutely everything. The humans had not been ignoring their ultimatum because they were too primitive to understand it. They had been ignoring it because they were too dangerous to care. What happened next would be discussed in Zephyrian military academies for the next 1,000 years, assuming the Empire survived long enough to have military academies. The space around the alien fleet suddenly erupted in light as what appeared to be empty vacuum revealed itself to be anything but empty. Admiral Quindar watched in horror as his tactical display transformed from showing a confident siege formation into something that resembled a three-dimensional nightmare, where moments before his sensors had detected only the primitive human vessels they had been tracking. Now the display showed a complete encirclement by ships that made his own fleet look like toys floating in a bathtub. Stealth technology, he whispered, his voice barely audible over the suddenly frantic beeping of every alarm system on the bridge. They have stealth technology that is superior to ours. Sir, Lieutenant Zeknar's voice cracked like breaking glass. I count over 3,000 human vessels in immediate proximity. They have been surrounding us for hours without our knowledge. But the ships themselves were not the most terrifying part. It was their size, where intelligence had confidently reported human vessels maxing out at 300 meters. Admiral Quindar now stared at readouts, showing human dreadnoughts that stretched over 5 kilometers in length, ships that dwarfed his own flagship and bristled with weapon systems that his computers could not even identify. Impossible. Commander Vaxadel's voice stammered through the communication system. Our intelligence indicated maximum human vessel size at 300 meters. That ship directly off our starboard bow is reading as 8 kilometers long. Maybe, suggested Captain Morthick with the tone of someone whose worldview was currently experiencing complete structural collapse. Maybe we were looking at their pleasure craft. The human weapons began firing with the kind of precision that suggested they had been practicing this exact scenario for quite some time. But these were not the chemical explosives or primitive energy weapons the Zephyrians had expected. Instead, streams of coherent energy that seemed to bend the laws of physics carved through space with surgical accuracy. "Shields down to 60%, announced Tactical Officer Vornak from somewhere in the growing chaos. "Sir, whatever they are using, it is cutting through our quantum barriers like they are not even there." "Return fire," Admiral Quindar commanded, though his voice carried more desperation than authority. "All ships, engage the enemy." What followed could barely be called a battle. The Zephyrian weapons, so effective against 47 previous civilizations, struck human shields that absorbed the impact without even flickering. Meanwhile, human return fire systematically disabled alien vessel after alien vessel with what appeared to be contemptuous ease. "Admiral," Captain Morthek's panicked voice cut through the destruction. "They are not trying to destroy us. Every shot is disabling our weapons and engines while leaving life support intact. They could have annihilated the entire fleet already." The realization hit Admiral Quindar like a physical blow. The humans were not fighting for their lives. They were not desperately defending their home world against overwhelming odds. They were casually swatting aside what they clearly considered a minor nuisance, with just enough effort to make their point without actually breaking a sweat. General Pike's voice returned to the communication channels, still carrying that same terrifying calm. "Alien vessels, you now have 30 seconds to transmit unconditional surrender, or we will stop playing with you and demonstrate what our weapons look like when we are actually trying." "Playing?" Admiral Quindar's voice reached pitches that Zephyrian vocal cords were not designed to produce. "They call this playing? 20 seconds. I should mention that you are currently surrounded by approximately 1% of Earth's active defense fleet. The other 99% is wondering if they will miss anything interesting." Commander Vaxisil's voice whispered through the communication system like a prayer. "Admiral, I recommend immediate surrender." 15 seconds. "Also, just so we are clear, that intelligence you received about human military capabilities, we wrote those reports ourselves. We thought it would be amusing to see how many species would believe that a civilization capable of interstellar travel would still be using chemical rockets." The bridge fell silent, except for the sound of Admiral Quindar's dignity dying. 10 seconds. "Oh, and those entertainment shows about alien invasions that you thought were fiction, those were actually training documentaries. We have been expecting you for quite some time." Admiral Quindar closed all 6 eyes and transmitted the words that no Zephyrian officer had ever spoken. "Human vessels, this is Admiral Quindar of the Zephyrian Imperial Fleet. We surrender, unconditionally." "Excellent choice," replied General Pike with what sounded suspiciously like satisfaction. "Welcome to Earth. You will find the climate quite pleasant this time of year. Please prepare to be boarded for processing." As human marines began docking with disabled Zephyrian vessels, Admiral Quindar reflected bitterly on the lessons learned. They had assumed that primitive appearance meant primitive capability. They had mistaken human entertainment for human ignorance. Most critically, they had confused human patience with human weakness. The hairless apes had not ignored the ultimatum because they did not understand it. They had ignored it because ultimatums only work when delivered by the stronger party. And as it turned out, in this particular conversation the humans had been the stronger party by such a margin that the Zephyrian threat had been less intimidating than a particularly stern weather forecast. Emperor Krelnox, monitoring the debacle from his command ship, made a note to update the Imperial conquest protocols. Step 1. Make absolutely certain you are actually the superior military force before issuing ultimatums. Step 2. When dealing with species that create entertainment about repelling alien invasions, consider the possibility that they might have given the subject some thought. Step 3. Never, under any circumstances, give humans a deadline. They take deadlines very, very seriously.